Carl, what have you done?
Think anyone will notice? Mr. Carl Jackson, right?
Carl Jackson was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. After the sudden death of his mother at the age of 11, he moved between LA and Orlando, Florida, trying to find his way in life.
So I'm clearly a Carl Jackson fan.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Although he was introduced to hard work, faith, and family values, as a struggling teen, he wandered down the path of least resistance, finding himself jailed twice. By the grace of God, he attended an evangelical church and found that there was a better way and accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior.
There's just no fake stuff about Carl Jackson.
Now, on the Salem Podcast Network, Carl has launched on a journey to help people of all races and backgrounds to discover facts of America's true past, as well as realize the benefits of utilizing their God-given gifts and talents, which far outweigh any benefit from a government subsidy or program.
It's dangerous out here. Let's roll, Carl.
Can't go fast.
Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I'm glad you are able to join us today. Today's show, we're going to start right off the bat with a deep dive into what China must be observing when they look at, or what they must be thinking when they observe Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So the question for today is simple. What is China learning from Putin's Ukraine invasion? Hat tip to the Daily Signal, and James Carafano came up with a great column that I suggest every single one of you read. What China's learning from Putin's invasion of Ukraine. A very important column, very timely. Listen, it's important that the West wake up. Pay attention to what's going on in the world. As crazy as this may sound, I think what Putin has done has awakened a sleeping giant of the West. Now, I know there's a lot of feckless leaders in the West. Unfortunately, China has been observing the landscape. You've got these macho men and Xi Jinping. You got the same with Vladimir Putin of China. They're looking at how they could take advantage of the West. Putin wants to restore Russia to the prominence of the USSR, to the prominence which it once held. Xi Jinping, on the other hand, wants to be America. In other words, they want to be the top dog. But looking at these two dictators, you have to wonder, okay, now, since Putin has gone into Ukraine, we have to wonder, China is the biggest threat, our biggest geopolitical threat as the United States of America. So we have to wonder, what is China thinking? And I think James Carafano of the Heritage Foundation puts his hands on it. So just as Putin will not rest easy until he sees that a Russian flag is flying over Kiev, you can rest assured that the same is true for Xi Jinping, the communist leader of China. Both of them want to secure their legacies. Both of them want to rebuild what they believe are their rightful territory, whether you agree with it or not. That's what they're looking to do. So what can China learn about Putin's invasion of Ukraine? Perhaps the lessons aren't exactly what Beijing expected, and that's what I want to get into. And listen, Taiwan is very important. Taiwan, I was looking at a column just earlier today, another column earlier today, and Taiwan ranks, I think it's number 6 as far as economic freedom is concerned. Not to mention that they make these microchips that we need in a lot of our vehicles, a lot of our computer technology and all that type of stuff. Taiwan exports, I believe they control about 80% of that market. So you can understand why China would want to take over Taiwan and literally be in control of the digital world that we're living in, or control the vast majority of the digital world that we're living in. Look at what's happened with the chip shortage right here in the United States. We see that a lot of brand new cars are sitting on lots or were unable to be sold simply because they didn't have chips available to put in some of these new cars. Thus, there was a run on a used car market. And as a result of that, you see used cars that are overpriced literally 30, 40%, 50% in some cases. I mean, I'm a connoisseur of used cars. I like buying old cars in great condition to drive. I don't like some of the newer technology cars. I know I'm a weirdo in that way, but the car that I drive right now is a 2007, and it is in immaculate condition. It is a luxury car, but it is in a very good condition, less than 100,000 miles, and I keep it pristine, and I keep it up. I keep it up very well. So one of the things that I like to do, however, is every 3 or so years, I would trade up my used car to get another used car, whatever I want, whether it's a luxury car, whether it's a sports car, whatever I may be feeling at the time. I'm not a rich man. So what I would do is just, once a car is over, 4 or 5 years old, it's not going to lose a lot of value at that point. And my cars don't. So I would buy them for X amount, and literally I drive them for 2-3 years, and they're worth almost just as much as what I purchased them for. But by that time, I have some time to save. Then I can sell that car, usually to an individual buyer, and then I can go out and buy another car that I'd want to be into. And typically, like I said, the car that I drive now is a 2007, but it's in excellent condition. But typically, I go for cars that are maybe 6-7 years old. 2007 is the oldest that I bought, and I actually bought this one, I want to say 3.5 to 4 years ago. And it was just a fabulous looking car. It drives well, really fast. I really love it. I love, I enjoy driving it, but I get the bug to try another car in 3 to 4 years. However, I'm priced out of the market. I'm not going to overpay for a used car. So one of the reasons why Taiwan is so important is because they make so many chips there. Now, we've learned as the United States of America that we need to start developing some of these microchips here. We cannot continue to deindustrialize in the United States of America without paying a cost. And I think this is what we're learning from Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but China is learning the same lesson. So it's important that we start manufacturing here if we're going to get the upper hand on China. All right, so Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if we didn't have a feckless American president, and if we didn't have a weakened, distracted, and divided Europe that he believed wouldn't confront him. He was right initially in that, but I think whether he knows it or not, what Putin is doing is Xi Jinping's dirty work for him. And I think he knows this. Listen, they met, and he realized that Xi Jinping has him by the Bozaks, if you will, because of this invasion, because he has to overwhelmingly rely on Xi Jinping to help finance him and to help make sure that Russia stays out of an economic or doesn't experience economic collapse. I'm not sure Xi Jinping can provide that for him, but we'll get into that. So again, whether he knows it or not, Putin is doing Xi Jinping's dirty work for him. And this is how. Rattled Europe will be vulnerable to China's desire to expand their influence in Europe. So we have great influence in Europe. We as the United States of America. Unfortunately, Europe in their old ways and their socialist ways are having some influence here too. But as far as the West is concerned, listen, America has large influence over the West, being the top dog. But China wants to exert their influence into Europe, and he figures that a weakened West, a weakened Europe, he can exert his influence into Europe and then simultaneously push out America's influence. But now I think Xi Jinping is, I think Putin kind of screwed things up for him, because now the West is forced to pay attention not only to Russia, but in the back of their mind, they always have to be wondering, or we always have to be wondering, what is China up to? So these are some lessons, not only that I think China is learning, but I think we're learning as a Western nation, learning a lot from Putin's invasion. And I'm not here today to talk about the invasion. We know that it's evil. We know that it's wrong. We know that war crimes are unfortunately being perpetuated on the people of Ukraine. We know that our feckless leader in the White House, Joe Biden, and quite frankly, paper tigers in NATO that are finally starting to grow a pair are, in my opinion, the reason to blame for the invasion in the first place. I do feel like they're complicit, and as long as these people depend on Russian crude oil, I do feel like, and I'm just being honest with you, that in part the left in America and the left in the West. Some of these global elitists are complicit in the murder of innocent Ukrainians. I hate to speak so bluntly, but I do believe that is that's the truth. But again, Putin is doing Xi Jinping's dirty work because he's weakening the West, or at least so he thought, while simultaneously pushing out the influence of America. That's what Xi Jinping was hoping for. That's what he wants to use Putin for. But one thing we do have to be aware of, China can't afford to be patient in their taking of Taiwan. So again, Xi Jinping is looking at Putin. Okay, what's happening? What can I learn from learn here? Now, there's a big difference between the taking of Taiwan and the taking of Ukraine. We'll get into some of those reasons. But I can say this, unfortunately, China can afford to be patient with Taiwan. Why? Because China realizes the West is weak. We're weak. When Trump came in office, when he was talking about make America great again, and the left they just went insane. They just went nuts. They did not want America to be strong again. The left in America wanted us to adopt this socialist mindset that you see across European nations. And Trump just wasn't having it. He wanted to restore America to a place of prominence where America was exceptional again, where we followed our Constitution, our Judeo-Christian values. Individual liberty was valued in America. You know, our economic prosperity, capitalism, all this kind of stuff, Trump wanted to put back on the map, on the forefront. He wanted us to be a strong nation again, not just one nation amongst many. We are exceptional. We are a shining city on a hill. And instead of running from that, Trump wanted to embrace that and return to our constitutional values. You may not like how he worked, but I respect that he did want to make America great again. And that's really important. But going back to China, China has the time and the ability to be patient, whereas Putin, it's a totally different story. So China realizes that the West is weak, and then that Trump was a major thorn in their side. But nothing about Putin's invasion of Ukraine suggests that China needs to change that timeline. They can still be patient. They can still observe. They can still watch. And honestly, they have to be patient, because even though the West is weaker, I believe, with some of the feckless leaders that we see in NATO and across Europe, unlike Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China would have to travel or go across hundreds of miles of water in order to take or in order to attack Taiwan. Big difference. And China wants to win quick and decisively. This is another thing they're learning from Putin. When people have a desire to fight and to fight for their country, that's something that can't be necessarily accounted for. That's not a logistical, you know what I mean? That's not a logistical issue. It's a matter of purpose. It's a matter of meaning. And that'll determine how hard people fight. You know, the Russians thought that the Ukrainians would just bend over and take it, and they're not doing that. And yes, it may be true that Russia may eventually take Ukraine. That may be a true statement. I pray to God that it isn't true, but that may be a true statement. But nonetheless, Russia is going to be bogged down in a longer war than they anticipated. And this is not good. So China is looking at this, and they're taking notes and saying, wait a minute, you know, if we were to take Taiwan, it needs to be quick and decisive. Perhaps China is looking at Putin's invasion of Ukraine and thinking again, wait a minute, if these people in Taiwan have the desire and the will to fight, maybe it won't be as easy for us as well. We're going to sit back and wait, make sure the West is weak, make sure they can't step in. You know, this is all this stuff that China needs to do. They need to break up NATO, weaken NATO. And unfortunately, what Putin has done and what China is witnessing is Putin has actually managed to unite NATO. NATO has been a paper tiger, in my opinion, for some time. Putin may be changing that around. We'll see. And then there are more lessons that Xi is learning that may not be exactly what we even saw coming, or what he saw coming. So Putin's potential conquest of Ukraine, again, has failed to be quick and decisive. So there are more things that come into play. it'll be very expensive. Putin's invasion of Ukraine is proving to be very expensive and debilitating to his campaign, and that's going to be a major blow to the Russian economy. And now we're starting to see corporations flee from Russia. This is going to destroy Russia's economy even more quickly. And sadly, but this is true. The goal of when you're in war, part of the battle is making sure, what you want to do if you're being attacked. And I think Ukraine is doing this good by, videos being posted on different social media sites. People are being extremely sympathetic to the people of Ukraine. So companies are leaving. Visa and MasterCard announced they were leaving. All of this stuff is becoming increasingly devastating to the Russian economy. And sadly, the people that pay the price are the regular citizens, the everyday citizens of Russia, who more than likely did not want to go to war. As a matter of fact, you're hearing stories time and time again where these people are saying, listen, we didn't want to go to war. Even many soldiers that are saying we were tricked into war. We were told we were going to fight some Nazis that were trying to take over Kiev, and we were going out to help. And all of this misinformation that Russian leaders and the leaders in the Russian military were giving their troops, and people just aren't as motivated to fight. And these Ukrainians are motivated to fight, which means the fight is going to go on longer than Russia anticipated. It's going to hurt the people of Russia, which in turn means they will likely turn against Putin. And I can guarantee you that's what the left is, or that's what Ukraine is banking on. And I got to say, Zelenskyy, whatever you may think of him, has been doing a fantastic job of saving his country to some extent anyway, and helping this fight go longer because of his propaganda. And I don't mean propaganda in a bad way. The guy is showing up. The guy is inspiring people. The guy is demanding that the West get involved, that NATO get involved, that the United States get involved. Now, listen, none of us want to see World War III, but you have to admit what Zelenskyy has managed to do with the help of Ukrainian citizens that are posting these fights on social media. What Zelenskyy has managed to do is to gain empathy or sympathy from around the world, putting pressure on Western leaders, both in Europe and right here in the United States. And I think, quite frankly, that this has helped prolong the fight. I mean, you say what you will about Zelenskyy, for a country that cannot match Russia in military might. Part of their power has been propaganda, and Zelenskyy has been doing a fantastic job of that. And I pray to God that his life is spared. But this war is proving to be more expensive than even Putin thought. Now you couple that with the fact that you have nations that are debating on whether or not they should stop buying crude oil from Putin. And of course they should, and we should, as the United States of America. We need to drill right here in the homeland. We don't need to count on Saudi Arabia. We don't need to go to Venezuela, Maduro of Venezuela. We don't need to go to OPEC. We don't need to go to any of these nations that don't have the same values that the United States of America has. We need to drill here. It is going to cost some pain, but it's going to cost us some pain as this war continues to drag out longer than Putin expected as well. Now, this is another question or lesson that China may be learning. Is Putin really a valuable ally to China? Perhaps he's becoming a detriment. So Putin has managed to unite NATO rather than divide them more. This is a very big deal. And now European countries are willing to spend money for their own defense, something that they weren't willing to do under Trump. I mean, Trump had to press them. Other Americans prior to Trump had not been pressing NATO to live up to their military spending commitments. We should not have to be, if you're in NATO, I don't think America should be contributing larger amounts to NATO. Listen, if we're going to be a part of NATO. You do your job. We'll do our job. We're allies in the fight against tyranny, if you will. So make sure you guys pony up. So now these countries are finally willing to spend more. This is something Xi Jinping didn't count on. Obviously, this is something that Vladimir Putin didn't count on. And now Congress is ramping up pressure right here in the United States, even with the crypt keeper in the White House, where the left has to be very careful and toe a tight line. Obviously, we don't want World War III, but we need to step up our own spending in the U.S. We need to strengthen our own military. So Zelenskyy has been doing a good job of garnering support around the world, and China's got to be looking at this and saying, "Ooh, if we invade China, what if this happens to us? Are we going to unite enemies against us?" Rather than people just sit by and take it, because again, right now we rely on Taiwan for many of the chips that are being produced. But not to mention, Taiwan is just a free nation. They are an independent free nation as far as economic freedom is concerned. I believe they're within the top 10. If I'm not mistaken, these are a free people. They don't want to be, they're a sovereign people. They don't want to be under a communist dictator. And so that I think that affects us all. Any nation, sovereign nation that wants freedom should not have to tolerate a communist dictator that wants to take them over. But they will have a financial impact. If Taiwan is taken, it'll have a major financial impact in the United States, because unfortunately we've deindustrialized. We've sent a lot of our manufacturing overseas. Absolute very dumb thing to do. There's some things and some products and materials that we may not have in the United States, and in that event, that's when trade is necessary, right? And I'm down for open and fair trade, but that's when trade is necessary. But when we have an abundance of fossil fuel, natural gas right here in the United States, we shouldn't be worried about going overseas to get any of that. When we have products, we have the manpower to be able to produce materials right here and products right here in the United States of America, rather than going overseas. We should do just that. Create the jobs here, make America a more powerful nation. And I'm tired of these social justice warriors that come in and says, "Oh, well, say America is systemically racist, so we need to farm out other jobs." Please, you don't think those nations, dictatorial nations, are systemically racist? What is Xi Jinping doing to the Uyghur population? There's a genocide going on from Muslims. You think Russia, you're not going to experience racism if you go to Russia, if you're a black person or a minority of any type? I mean, get real. Liberals need to grow up. It's just really insane. Another thing, Beijing is spending too much geopolitical capital to side with Russia. So this is something that they're learning. So not only do they have to fend off allegations, which we know is true, that they're committing Uyghur genocide, they also now have to say, okay, is it worth defending Russia when we know that Russia is committing war crimes? Because now that other countries see that Russia is willing to commit war crimes and China is willing to help fund them, then Western nations are again going to be more apt to look at China and say, wait a minute, we need to be concerned about them as well. This is not what China wants. Again, China wants to exert their influence over the West. But if the West becomes standoffish because now they have to deal with defending Russia's war crimes, China may be thinking, oh my God, this isn't good for us in the long run. And then the war crimes are being witnessed on social media. So this is going to affect China's credibility as long as they continue to support Russia. And they will. Let's be honest. They're getting cheap crude oil from Russia right now, and they're going to continue to take advantage of that. But I think it may hurt them in the long run. But Moscow is becoming an economic disaster. This is something that China has to consider. Even though they use their basically their debt trap, I forget what it's called, to make Russia beholden to China. propping up Russia is probably going to cost China more than they can spare. There's a reason why we're number one and they're not. But if we continue to weaken ourselves, if we continue to commit economic suicide from within, yes, China could pop up. China could be number one. They could exert their sphere of influence over the entire globe. This would not be a good thing. We want to spread freedom, not fascism, not communism around the world. But Russia could be becoming an economic liability to China. So this is what China is starting to see. And then here's an even bigger wake-up call for China. So the West has been committing economic suicide by basically in the name of climate change or climate action, right? So we've, again, Biden shut down the Keystone XL pipeline. He greenlit the Nord Stream 2 pipeline between Russia and Germany. And now, Germany we're taking steps to stop buying crude oil, even though that's weakening a little bit. But Canada is doing the same. I mean, this is all hurting. This is all hurting not just Russia, and will hurt not just Russia, but China as they continue with this bigger debt load. But the big fear here is we've been committing economic suicide in the West by abandoning fossil fuels. And China is building these coal-fired plants left and right. This is a winner for them, a money maker for them. But if the West says, wait a minute, they realize now with renewable energies are not reliable. And so in times of war, renewable energies will be a great disaster. Not to mention, let's be honest, when you're creating things like solar panels, electrical vehicles, and stuff like that, you do tons of damage to the environment. Sure, while you utilize them, they run clean. You use them clean, solar panels or whatever it may be. But disposing of them and building them cause so much damage to the environment. It's actually worse than using fossil fuels and combustible engines. So these things are basically a way to virtue signal. If you like them for fun, if you like solar panels because you want to cut down costs in your home, electrical costs, on etc. Hey, more power to you. If you're trying to virtue signal, please, you're no more moral than anyone else for using these products, and the same is true for electrical vehicles. But China has to be really scared, because now if the West starts saying, oh, wait a minute, we cannot rely on Russia for oil. We have to go back to the United States, or we can't rely so heavily on this green energy. China is scared. China will get a little nervous because they are banking on the West continuing to be stupid when it comes to climate change and climate action, and systematically the West, we have been destroying our economies for the sake of for basically a hoax. All right, when it comes to this climate action, it's absolute nonsense. So if the West wakes up and we return to fossil fuels, this is not good news for Xi Jinping. He's less needed. He's less of a threat. And then we are growing economically, and that makes a major difference. In closing this out, and again, before I do, I want to encourage every single one of you listening to please like and share my Facebook page, Carl Jackson Radio, Twitter and Parler at Carl Jackson Show, wherever podcasts can be found. And please support the Salem Podcast Network as well. Sometimes we get kicked off of YouTube. You can always go to SalemPodcastNetwork.com to find any of the Salem Podcast team, including myself. So please do that. And then also, I want to just encourage you to go to anywhere you find podcasts: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. Make sure you click on that bell for YouTube. And if you do that, that'll help us out greatly. That'll make sure that we continue to spread the message of freedom while big tech tries to and attempts to censor us. But listen, I think China is learning a lesson. I think they're learning a lesson, and I think the question is as well, is the United States going to wake up? Are we going to learn our lesson? We have to be strong. We have to be independent. There's nothing wrong with saying America first. There's nothing wrong with embracing America first. You don't think China embraces China first? You don't think Russia embraces Russia first? You don't think these European nations or even Australia and all these people embrace their nations first and look out for their best interests first? When we don't do that, when we don't look out for our best interests, we get soaring gas prices, soaring food prices, supply chain shortages, and all of this stuff that is destabilizing the United States as a result of the left's attack against the United States. We can thwart some of those attacks from within by building from within. As crazy as that sounds, but it's true. It's true. We can manufacture here, so even the left that tries to take us down here, it becomes much harder for them to do so. You give people a taste of freedom, they don't want to give it up. You give people a taste of success and prosperity, they do not want to give it up. The left fundamentally understands that. So America First is a very important doctrine that President Trump brought to the forefront, and it's very, very important that we return there. Even if you don't like President Trump, it's not about that. It is about having a strong nation. Let me read these closing paragraphs that James Carafano of the Heritage Foundation wrote about in regards to this column. He says, let's be honest. Even before Putin attacked Ukraine, Beijing was right to think the West was in the process of geopolitical suicide. Not one Western leader showed Putin any backbone. They still cling to their climate action nonsense. We still talk a lot about protecting supply chains, and then Congress offers to subsidize costs for high-tech companies knee-deep in China. This is true. Yet, he says, the resistance in Ukraine has stirred some buried truth in the West, like being dead asleep and then shocked awake. A reminder that if we don't defend our freedom, our safety, and our prosperity, no one will. The lesson for Beijing may be to wait a bit. It may well decide to wait and see what happens after the Ukraine war. If the West returns to its strategic slumbers, or if defending the free world becomes a new reality in the postmodern world, you can bet Xi will be rooting for the former. Guys, it's got to be America first. Someone wants to rule the world. It sounds like a crazy movie, right? Crazy movie line. But if we, the greatest country that God has ever made, if we don't stand up for freedom, someone is going to stand up for something else. And I believe it will be China that will be standing up for tyranny. So it's either freedom or tyranny. You choose. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in to today's edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, remember to follow me, like and subscribe everywhere podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I appreciate you guys listening. And until next time, don't grow weary doing good, and God bless you.